Analyst Glenn Ignazio, who joins the program. He's retired major in the Air Force Special Operations, who's a commander there for many years. And we want to start, I think, Glenn, with what Robert was talking about, which is what's the U.S. response to this, right? In 2021 in Geneva, I was actually there at the news conference covering the Putin-Biden summit when President Biden was asked what would happen if Navalny died. He said there would be devastating consequences. But he since said that, some of those consequences have already been implemented because that was before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And now it's tough to tell. Is he going to go any further? He's hinted maybe some more sanctions. What do you think? What does the U.S. do from here?
Yeah, it's a tough one. There's so many sanctions against Russia already as it is. And so what else is there? So I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. The other thing is how unified this could be with other countries. So how to be able to wrap and contain Russia in a way that makes it painful for Putin and not for the people, that's going to be a big question. And I'm not quite sure what they have on their list, but there's a lot of talk. Let's see what the action is.
Now, speaking of action or lack thereof, the way Russia's been handling this, it doesn't look like we're going to get any direct answers, maybe ever, but certainly in the next few weeks. What they told Navalny's family is that died from quote-unquote sudden death syndrome. That's what the prison first was saying. That's what his mother was apparently told over the weekend, and that the body would not be given to the family until they completed an investigation. So it would take some time, and then, obviously people are wondering what they're covering up. What's the impact of all of this, to Robert's point, and how maybe destabilizing it could be within Russia?
I think it's significant in a way. Well, first of all, say he died from natural causes. The idea of hiding him this bad is, right. Indicates differently. I mean, his mother and their lawyer went up to Siberia to try to find him. They're still trying to find him. And then the idea that his wife is being very pronounced, very vocal about this is really important. You have a lot of discontent within Russia because of the mandatory drafts and pulling people into the fight in Ukraine and a lot of killings there. Right. But the idea of having that intentional killing of his number one adversary as far as the election. So this could really destabilize internally in Russia, which put pressure against Putin. Hopefully that would be something that'd be significant against Putin.
And would it have an impact on the war effort in Ukraine? Because that was really what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit, because, if you look at it, we have a map of Ukraine with the advances from Russia capturing that key city, and Avdiivka, the Russian forces were saying this is a big win for them. So, you have some reason to believe that, hey, maybe things aren't going that great for Ukraine right now. They're not getting the money that they need. There's a big debate in our Congress about whether that will be approved or it won't be. What about the impact of Navalny's death in terms of how it affects the war effort in Ukraine? Do you think there is any impact?
I don't think it's going to impact the operations in Ukraine. Putin has all controls of the government, and so I don't think it's going to impact that. One of the biggest things is, of course, the weapons that needs to get to them so that they're being sustained. But Russia's always going to have more than what Ukraine does. Ukraine really needs to focus on getting more people. Zelensky's never instituted a draft. He should. But as far as what happened with Navalny, Putin, and this unrest within Russia, he's been too formidable. Putin has been too formidable and will not pull back as far as the military operations within Ukraine itself. So I don't see that affecting it.
What about the actual aid and whether it gets approved in some way, whether it's what they're talking about in the Senate, what they're talking about in the House? Pew Research has a poll about Americans viewing the Ukraine-Russia war as important to their interests, and finding it somewhat important, we're 30%. Finding it very important, 43%. So, 3 out of 4 basically say it's important, but there's still a sizable number of people in this country who are tired of war and are saying that we shouldn't be sending money there, and there's this big debate back and forth. What would you say, in the middle of all this debate about whether Ukraine deserves and needs this funding and how important it is to U.S. interests?
Well, I believe that Ukraine definitely needs the funding, as you can see the drill down of the weapons and how it's affecting them accordingly. Europe and the EU is trying to pick up as much as they can, but it's not as much for the gap that we have provided America. Politically, I think they need to take care of the United States. That's where a lot of people are in discontent, is we're putting money overseas. But the idea of how this affects it is that Ukraine needs the weapons, absolutely. But they're very war weary. I mean, it's been a couple of years being there, seeing the people completely worn down. That's why Zelensky has to look at the other resource, which is people. And that is something he really needs to focus on. This is an open strategy where we're just supplying. We need to see really a strategy and tactics of how to push Russia out. Now, that is something that's significant against Russia versus a sanction.
And when you say people, you're talking, as you mentioned a moment ago, about a draft. Is that what you're referring to specifically? Or what more would you like to see done on the Ukrainian side? Forget the U.S. for a moment.
Yeah, it may not be well received in Ukraine, but
Yeah.
yes, I mean, one of the reasons we went over there was for humanitarian aid. Originally, we were going to fight until we saw all these, military age males on the border. So Zelensky said you can't leave the country if you're military age male, but he's never instituted a draft and he's up for election. So that's some discontent there. But that is the number one resource that he has control over that really needs to occur. These people that have been fighting it are very tired, and there's a lot of military age males parting it up in other parts of the country, like it or not. He needs to make that change. That is something that's significant and immediate.
That's interesting to me because, I was there on the border with Poland and Ukraine the day or a couple of days after the war broke out, and you saw so many people coming back from other parts of the world volunteering. They just have a duffel bag over their shoulder and they went in to volunteer. But that was 2 years ago, and it's a war-weary country, and maybe it's a different situation now. But Glenn, thank you as always. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Glenn Ignazio. Republican